All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to our May Book Sandwich In program. I'm Dina Viviani, just with a couple housekeeping announcements to start. For safety purposes, if there is a need to evacuate the building, the door on my right, your left, is our closest exit. For anyone using a hearing aid, we invite you to take advantage of our induction loop system. It amplifies all sound coming through the microphone. And along those lines, if we have time for Q&A, please wait for this microphone to reach you at the end so that everyone can hear and participate. Please silence or turn off your cell phones now so as not to disrupt the speaker. And would like to thank the Friends of Brighton Memorial Library for sponsoring the program. We just had another great, successful book sale over at the church, so thank you to everyone who was able to participate. We also have the Friends Bookstore open at the rear of the library if anyone wants to check out the selection of used books and help sponsor our programs. And please grab a May program brochure. We have a lot going on. It's the beginning of the month, so we have a lot following today's program. Tonight we have Color Bright and Green about pollinator pathways. On next Tuesday, we have Discovering Your Jewish History about some newly digitized historical resources. We've got health and nutrition. We've got Eleanor Roosevelt. We've got our book clubs. So please do grab a program brochure. And to tell you about our presenter who will be reviewing our book, The God of the Woods. Oops. See, I didn't print. Okay. Karen Morris recently retired from 29 years as Brighton Town Judge and longer as a law professor at Monroe Community College, where she continues to teach as an adjunct. She strongly believes in equal application of the law. She's the author of textbooks, a treatise for lawyers on New York criminal law, and a column titled Legally Speaking in Hotel Management magazine. Her favorite authoring project was her book titled Law Made Fun Through Harry Potter's Adventures, which she is in the process of updating in anticipation of the remake of the movies with a whole new cast to be released in early 2027. Her two favorite volunteer activities are performing children's magic at not-for-profit agencies and serving free food at Salem Nutrition Center. She has won numerous awards, most recently Outstanding Jurist from the Monroe County Bar Association. And anyone who has followed along with BSI knows that she's one of our regular and beloved reviewers. So we were very happy to welcome Karen Morris. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. There we go. Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming out to talk further about this fascinating book, The God of the Woods. It is, at one level, a story of a girl who goes missing at camp. How many have read it? Great, great, great. Most of you. There will, of course, be spoiler alerts for those of you who haven't, and that is, I think, a risk that you assume if you come to a book review. This book is like a 1,000-piece puzzle. There are so many subplots and so many characters that the author has woven together. And in the end, all pieces fit neatly together. But boy, when you're reading, it's hard to see that coming and see how it was going to work out. Liz Moore is the author. She's known for intricate plots, complex characters, and the ability to upend expectations, all of which apply in this book. Additionally, she's known to write about class, addiction, neglect, and grief, again, all of which are front and center in this book. She's described as transporting readers deeply into the ominous world of her characters. And that, too, is a good description of this book. The title, God of the Woods. So there is indeed in Greek mythology a god of the woods. The name is Pan, and Pan is referenced ever so slightly, but referenced in the book. Pan presents as half man and half goat, the upper body being the man and the bottom half of the body being the goat. Sometimes Pan is depicted with goat horns on his head, and the appearance is suggestive of bridging the gap between civilization and nature, which of course fits in with what you might expect for God of the Woods, particularly woods as dense as what we have in the Adirondack Park. Also, Pan is known as being untamed, known for his antics. He likes to trick, confuse, and even disorient people, even until they lose their bearings and their mind. He is clearly at work in this story. So perfect title for her book. Because the book takes place in the Adirondacks, there are some very fun local references throughout the book. Let me highlight those for you. Of course, the Adirondack Park, such a lovely resource that we have in our state. Louise was held in custody in the town of Wells, which is a town in southern Adirondacks. It may be a town with which some of you are familiar. Also, Saratoga Springs was referenced. That's where Tracy's dad and stepmom go to the track. And one of the activities they wanted to do during the summer, and so pushed Tracy, even paid her to go to summer camp. There's a reference to Storytown in Lake George, which includes Ghost Town and Jungle Land. It was a Mother Goose themed amusement park. Many of you, if you're my contemporary, spent some fun time at Storytown in Lake George. Today, it is no surprise, a Six Flags Great Escape Park. There's a reference to North Creek. That's where Jacob Sluter was found. It is indeed a hamlet in the Adirondacks in Warren County, known for skiing. Gore Mountain is located nearby. It has a population of 562 people. The conservator who removed the pink paint layer from Barbara's bedroom wall, she was in the book, The Hyde Museum in Glens Falls. And indeed, there is an existing art museum called the Hyde Historic House and Art Museum in Glens Falls. Louise had a full scholarship from Union College. Of course, that's college near in Schenectady, a private liberal arts college. The author referenced Raybrook. That was where police headquarters were located. That too is a hamlet that exists, located between Saranac Lake and Lake Placid in the town of North Elba. It houses an office of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and a federal corrections institute. That Department of Environmental Conservation, ENCON, they were involved in the search for Barbara, and there was some friction between law enforcement police and the environmental conservation folks. Those folks' expertise is conserving the environment and preserving the Adirondacks, quite different than being involved with law enforcement. There were newspaper clippings about Judita being involved in the investigation, and they came from the Albany Times-Union, which is indeed a newspaper in Albany, and it used to be a newspaper in Rochester. That was the afternoon paper. Niskayuna was referenced when parents came to retrieve their campers after Barbara went missing. We were told as readers of a number of places from which parents came. One of them was Niskayuna, which is a town in Schenectady County. And then there was the Black Fly Goodbye Party. That is a thing. They are prevalent, those black flies. They bite, and their time is mid-May to late June or early July. They bite and sting, but they leave for when warmer weather sets in, because the warmer weather in the Adirondacks, that's July, they go to a more suitable habit. The rivers and streams warm, and that's an issue for the black flies. They don't like that. They also, their predators increase. So as summer sets in, birds and other insects come into the Adirondacks, and they are not compatible with the black flies. And so the black flies go to greener pastures. They are the worst between Mother's Day and Father's Day. So it is appropriate, as Mother's Day is days away. Congrats to all the moms, that we talk about black flies today. So when in early July, there's a goodbye black fly party, that is consistent with what actually exists with the black flies. Self-reliance. The name of the main house on the Van Leer Preserve is Self-Reliance. In the acknowledgement in the book, at the end, the author gives thanks to Ralph Emerson's Self-Reliance, which provided, she said, invaluable information to her as she wrote. The part that I think is most relevant from that self-reliance essay is this: society, groups of people, everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members. A virtue is conformity. Self-reliance is its aversion. I am ashamed to think how easily we capitulate to large societies, to large societies. So she values this self-reliance, and that is a significant theme in the book. There are various characters we see evolving into self-reliance. One classic is Juditha. She's the inspector. She had been living at home ultimately to do her job well and to be involved with the search for Barbara. She needed to live closer to where she was reporting for work every day. She stayed at an inn and then moved out of her house. This was anathema to her parents. In fact, there was a time, you recall, those of you who read it, where Dad went to the inn to try and force her to come home and stay with the parents until she married. That was the expectation and the practice in the family. In her larger family, no girl left home until they were married. But she rebuffs her dad and gives priority to the job and the responsibility that she has to assist in the search, and refuses to go home. The Barbara herself hates her family, doesn't want to go to the reform school where she would be headed in the fall. And she, of course, becomes most self-reliant, learning to survive in the woods and able to do that without assistance from family. We have TJ, who evolves from this young girl who learns a lot about survival and becomes the director of the camp, following in Dad's footsteps at a time when women were not directors of camps, were not in leadership positions. We'll talk more about the role of women, how that evolved during the time of this camp. But that is TJ is another example of becoming self-reliant. Hayes and Danny Hayes and the guys who Juditha worked with, they also evolved, initially treating her rather paternalistically and diminishing her skills. And over time, they saw that indeed this is a woman with significant skills in investigations, and they evolved and allowed Juditha to become more self-reliant also in her work. We see Delphine. Delphine is Alice's sister. She plays I was going to say minor part, but there's a significant storyline involving her, but she decides to go back to school and attempt to become more self-reliant. The survival trips at camp, so those are intended to help the campers, to instill in the campers great skills to be self-reliant if they are in the woods, if they want to go camping, or should they be found to have been lost in the woods, they have developed skills to be self-reliant. A great one, Carl Stoddard. So he was the one who got blamed for Bear's absence. He sought a job as a gardener at the preserve. He didn't, we're told, he didn't have much experience with gardening, but had a library card. And so he felt he could make up whatever loss he had, and kudos to the value of a library card. He also exaggerated his mother's gardening teaching. He said that she submitted some of her flowers for competitions at the local county or state fairs, and that she won every year and taught him everything she knew. But we learned that she never won. She submitted her flowers but didn't win. But he was being self-reliant in a way that allowed him to get the job as the assistant gardener. Mrs. Stoddard, she's Scary Mary. She took it upon herself to look for Bear to clear her husband, being very self-reliant in attempting to clear his name. She also, remember, mortgaged her house to get bail for Louise. She said she wasn't going to let the powers that be again accuse someone wrongfully, very self-reliant in attempting to right those wrongs. Let's see, Vic Hewart, covering for Alice and the Van Lairs, leads the search for Bear and directs people away from where Bear had been located, where Bear had been buried. And he was doing that in order to preserve for his daughter the rights to the land that the camp was built on. We see all of these examples of self-reliance. In addition to the author's focus on self-reliance, she also focuses on class and doesn't like the circumstances where people of money get benefits that people without money and rank don't get. So in the book, the wealthier clans are the ones who are not self-reliant. So we see John Paul McClellan. He can't pick his own spouse. His parents are doing that for him. He can't get through college easily on his own. It took, I love this, 6 years and 2 forgiving deans. So he couldn't get out of his criminal charges without the contacts that his father had. Alice couldn't take care of her own children. Now, these are Van Lairs. These are all part of the financially privileged people in the book. Alice isn't allowed to take care of her own children. Peter, her husband, interferes, dominates, stops her from going to Bear as a baby when he was calling for his mother. He also was the one who selected the 2 nurses who were going to be with the baby around the clock without consulting her. Alice didn't meet those nurses until they actually showed up on the job. Louise, though she was not among the wealthy, she had a full scholarship to Union, but drops out because she can't afford books. So one has to wonder, self-reliance, get a job and make money to get books if you've got all the rest of your finances paid for. interesting to me at Monroe Community College, and I think most of the SUNY schools now, there is a fund to help students when they have circumstances that cause them to be diverted from the ability to study. So there is funds for food, there are funds for supplies, for books if students can't afford books. We have a hospitality program. If you're training to be a chef, you need certain selection of knives that the student is expected to buy, and this fund goes towards that. So I have to wonder why, and those are relatively new, so not in existence when Louise would have benefited in the mid-70s from such a program. But there's a lack of self-reliance in my mind on Louise. The author, in addition to self-reliant, the essay by Emerson, also thanks David Thoreau for the book Walden. And the piece that I think she was referring to is this: live a life of simplicity, deliberately avoid material success and wealth. It will lead to destruction of one's soul. And it is indeed those folks who are the Van Leers and the McClellans, and who are, and the family of Annabelle, who are engage in various conduct that is questionable morally. Let's go to that treatment of women by men. This was the mid-1970s. This was the time when women were beginning in significant numbers to go into the work world and progress to higher positions. We see Juditha and her male colleagues, how they were very unaccepting and patronizing towards her, called her honey, slapped her on the back. Danny Hayes told her in the beginning of the search, "Don't be nervous, I'll take all the hard stuff," like thinking that she's not up for the job. Alice and Peter, so again, with Peter being very dominant in terms of the care of the child, not allowing Alice to have a say in who was going to be hired, being very paternalistic. That was a view that many males at the time had about females. We saw the relationship between Louise and John Paul McClellan becoming violent at one point. Also, he hiding her from his family. He didn't come to her when during the Goodbye Black Fly party, when he had said he would come and meet her at her cabin. He didn't do that for 5 or 6 days. All sort of an attitude of women being inferior. I can take advantage of them. That it was a view that women at the time dealt with. The women were beginning to expand career opportunities. I graduated law school in 1975. Exactly 10% of the class were women. Today, it's 50% or more. At the time, there was that headline when Juditha graduated from her training program: the nation's first class of female state troopers graduates at Albany. The concept of sexual harassment in the workplace became prevalent at this time. It was a right that women had, and men, but mostly it was applicable to women, not to be at work seen as a sexual object, to be free from sexual jokes, sexual pictures on the wall, sexual touching by bosses or coworkers. And in the lawsuits, the biggest violators were police departments and fire departments. These were organizations that always were all men, and they were not welcoming of women. It was a difficult time for women, and there were some very successful sexual harassment actions that resulted in mandates of employers taking the initiative, being assertive to train workers that sexual harassment is not acceptable in the workplace and will lead to significant consequences, including termination. Many women were successful in bringing lawsuits and obtaining lots of financial rewards for tolerating sometimes very virulent types of sexual harassment. So that was part of the environment that Judita was working within. Then there was a reference when one of the parents learned that TJ was the director of camp. There was concern by the parent who said, "Whoever heard of a woman camp director?" Well, these were the times when all the first woman judge, the first woman camp director, the first conductor of an orchestra, the first police chief that was female. All of these were developing, and I thought the author did a nice job of describing that time in history. Camp. So this did take place at a camp. Many of you may have gone to summer camps. Many of you may have memories of, and great memories, hopefully, of your camp experiences. Each camp comes, whether it's a Girl Scout camp, a Boy Scout camp, a 4-H camp, a camp connected with a religious organization. Each camp has its protocols, its customs, and its traditions, and it was fun to look at those from this book. So the names of the cabins, we know of Balsam and Spruce. How typical was that the cabins would be named after types of trees. Opening night campfire with songs and rituals. And at this camp, it was chopping a log, and then there were skits by counselors. You probably remember some of the opening night protocols from your camp. Discussion of rules, the ghost stories. I thought it was interesting at this camp, in the cabins, there was a partition behind which the counselors slept. And then the campers were on the other side of that partition. No camp I ever went to, and I went to numerous ones, had that kind of partition. As a lawyer, I would not recommend to the camp organizers that they have that partition. It cuts off the oversight by the counselors of the campers. And that lack of oversight played a potentially big role in this story. Another part I thought was so tender was the discussion about the girls' relationships with each other and talking about their boyfriends, the first kisses, and then in when one of the final dance nights, there was a culmination of all that they had learned from each other: grooming trips, shaved legs, great care in selecting their outfits, how to apply makeup. All of that I think of as part and parcel of attending camp. I confess I have pierced ears because one time at camp, a friend of mine and I decided we would skip whatever it was that we were supposed to go to, and she pierced my ears. We used ice and like a needle. I'm fortunate it was a good job. It could have been slightly otherwise. There is in the book a lot of police action, and I want to comment on a couple of those. One was interesting where Sluter, who was, he was a serial killer, he had escaped, he was found. He happened, because of where he was hiding out, one of the times when he had escaped, he had seen the burial of Bear and knew where Bear was buried. He offered to show the police where that was. And now the police have a big decision whether to take him there. He was a pro at bolting. He had a history of bolting and manipulating those around him. And the question was whether if they take him to the spot, can he be sufficiently contained? Is that an appropriate action for police to take? I once had something similar as judge. There was a defendant who was charged with a significant crime. I think it was manslaughter. And as part of the crime, there was a man and a woman, and they were a couple. And as part of the crime, one of them, the other one was killed. And there was to be a wake and a funeral. And the other, who was in custody, wanted to go to the funeral and asked for permission to do that. And so the question became, can I, as judge, give authorization for that? It was sort of not a lot of precedent to go by. I first asked police whether they felt comfortable in being able to contain her, it was a her, if she was at the funeral home. And we ultimately, and I appreciated her, she wanting to be there. There was concern about her interacting with other people, and also the idea of bolting. And so I ultimately ruled that she could go, but not when anybody else was there, at a time if the funeral home was willing to have her be able to see him and say her goodbyes, and police were willing to do that. So the book talked about the issues. He would, if they were going to do it, he would have to be shackled at the ankles, Sluter, and handcuffed to his waist. Those were very appropriate precautions. There was an interesting issue where Annabelle and Louise and the bag of drugs. So that bag of drugs, as I understand it, was placed in John Paul McClellan's truck by TJ. John Paul McClellan claimed that it was Louise's, and Louise had given it to him when that was found, that bag was found. Annabelle claimed that she got the drugs from Louise. And so Louise and Annabelle and John Paul McClellan are all pointing the finger at each other. In order, when one of the police officers is questioning Louise, and when there are some circumstances that pointed to her as a possible suspect in the disappearance of Barbara, the police officer said that Annabelle had told the police officer that the drugs were given to Annabelle by Louise. I'm not sure that that was a truthful statement, but here's the relevant law. Police can lie. They can use deception during interrogations. So police can say that when the suspect is being questioned, police can say that their fingerprints were found at the scene or on the gun when in fact they weren't. Police can say they have video footage that doesn't exist that would implicate the suspect. Police can say that someone else blamed everything on the suspect, even though that's not true. a growing number of states are banning that type of deceptive interrogation tactics when the suspect is a minor. But otherwise, police are able to suggest they have evidence that in fact does not exist in an effort to let the suspect know that that the officer believes and has the evidence that the suspect did it, and with the goal that the suspect then will confess. There was the reference to a person of interest. John Paul McClellan became a person of interest. A person of interest is someone who may have relevant information to a criminal investigation, but does not imply guilt, but is someone police want to question. A suspect is different from a person of interest. A suspect is someone who the police believe they have reasonable grounds to establish that the suspect committed a crime, though the suspect is not yet charged, but law enforcement treats that person as potentially responsible for the offense, but not a person of interest. Person of interest is a lesser, there's less evidence against that person. Though once police find the person of interest and question the person of interest, that person of interest may elevate to a suspect or an actual accused. John Paul McClellan was arrested for DWI, driving while intoxicated, because he failed those field sobriety tests. The field sobriety tests could have included any of these. Walk on an imaginary line, heel to toe. It could be finger to nose, where the person is instructed to put their arms out and then touch their nose with their finger. It may be saying the alphabet. It may be what is called HGN, horizontal gaze nystagmus test, which has to do with involuntary jerking of the eyes when following an object. So if you drink alcohol, your eyes, when you follow that object, may jerk. And that's a test that police give. They usually use a pen and have the person watch the pen as it goes by. Another is a one-leg stand, where you stand on one leg and count aloud to 30. So now you're testing the person's ability to, yeah, I think it's hard to do sober. I think that one is hard sober. But they're tested, police are testing two things. One, the ability to stand on one leg, and also the ability to count. Then we saw Hayes when interviewing Louise, and they have some history. So Hayes's daughter and Louise had a relationship as kids. Hayes had a short-term relationship with Louise's mother. Hayes has some sentiment and concern for Louise. And as Hayes is questioning her, he realizes maybe she's got stuff to hide and needs a lawyer. He gives her the advice to stay quiet and get a lawyer. That is most unusual. Police normally do not want their suspects or their people of interest to lawyer up, because once the lawyer gets involved, of course, the lawyer is going to say to the client, say nothing. You can only hurt yourself. You can't help yourself. And so it was a major assistance to Louise that that Hayes told her to get a lawyer. There was the issue with bail, and we saw that both John Paul McClellan and Louise were arrested by the police. John Paul McClellan was able to get a bail hearing very quickly and released from bail. I think police purposefully were slow in arranging for her bail hearing. She hadn't yet gotten a lawyer, so she was in custody for several days. And she was in a holding cell for 10 hours. No, well, let's stick with the bail for a moment. The bail issue, it was because of that disparity in the way that bail was imposed by judges that we had bail reform. And the bail, the bail reform law is considered by many, many people to have swung too far to the left. It took from judges the authority to impose bail, except in violent criminal concerns, criminal charges. And then the only factor that, or the big factor that the judge can consider is the likelihood of the person returning to court. The potential dangerousness of the defendant was not a factor. We're one of the few states where that was not a factor that the judge could consider. So we did have that bail reform. It happens that there is a current proposal before our legislature that would give judges greater discretion. Judges would be able to consider whether a defendant poses a danger to the public. I always thought, wow, it seems like that's such a significant concern. But once bail reform came in, I couldn't consider that. And you can be sure that defense attorney made very clear to the judge, or reminded the judge every time, that that was not a factor that you could consider. So now there is this proposal that would allow the judge to consider the dangerousness to help remove that unequal application which led to bail reform. There is in the bill a standardized risk assessment tool that would determine dangerousness that every judge would have to abide by. Our Sheriff Ted Baxter is an advocate of this new law, not surprisingly. It's currently under consideration by both the New York Senate and the Assembly. Another issue with the questioning was that Louise was held in her cell for 10 hours without food. This is, unfortunately, a common interrogation technique in trying to stress the subject. No food, of course, stresses the subject. The goal of the interrogation is to attain information and a confession. Giving the suspect food makes the interviewer a good guy, and the suspect then is more inclined to speak when questioned. However, going too long, leaving the suspect too long without food or drink, could lead to an involuntary confession, and then that becomes an argument to set aside the confession and not have it be used at trial. Sometimes that works, sometimes not, depending on all of the facts and circumstances. But think of the Innocence Project, which is a wonderful organization that it helps people who are wrongly convicted to be exonerated. And sometimes it's because defendants make confessions falsely, in part because they're hungry and they're worn down, not because they really did the crime, but they're promised if they confess, they'll get food and they'll get other needs satisfied. Let's see, I am aware of the time. I want to highlight a few things. There was a reference to statutory rape. Statutory rape has to do with the age of consent. So I'm trying to remember that there were two references to statutory rape. One was Lee Townsend, who was the chef. Chef overstates what he was. He was like the assistant cook and dishwasher. He had spent time in jail because of statutory rape. There was another, and that was a very interesting description. So he was having a sexual relationship with a girl who was 16. In New York, the age of consent is 17. So when you're under 16, even though one party, and it's usually the woman is usually considered the complainant, the victim, and the male is usually the defendant. So that was the circumstance with Lee Townsend. The father caught them, and the father claimed that this was statutory rape, and the girl said at 16, no, I was not forced. This was what I wanted. It doesn't matter in the eyes of the law. You don't have the ability to consent. You don't have the good judgment, the experience, the maturity to decide in the eyes of the law at 16 that you want to engage in a sexual relationship. So though she may have been very willing, nonetheless, it is statutory rape, statutory suggesting that the girl was underage and didn't consent for that reason, as opposed to rape, which is forceful sexual encounters. In the end, we saw that Peter Van Laar, the second and the third, were both, and we applaud this, indicted for something, and it was conspiracy to obstruct justice for hiding information about Bear's death and burial, which became relevant and new during the search for Barbara. Conspiracy is a crime that's committed by more than one person. So conspiracy, it takes several people acting in concert to commit the crime. A few other things with the time. History of the Adirondacks. I think that this is so interesting. The land was initially owned by the Sluters, the preserve, the Van Laar Preserve. They were Dutch immigrants. They used the land for logging during the logging boom of the 1820s and made a good living from that. According to the author in the book, in the 1870s, politicians became weary of what logging might do to the water supply downstate and threatened to ban it altogether within the Adirondack Park. And as a result, the Sluter family sold it to the Van Laars, which was Barbara's great-grandfather. In the actual history, let me read you some information. The vast forests of the Adirondacks were accessible for harvest of logging due to the presence of rivers floating the logs downstream to the mills. Logging companies would purchase land, clear it of timber, then essentially abandon the land. Because companies would allow the barren land to revert to state control due to unpaid taxes, most of the Adirondack region was owned by the state of New York, they foreclosed on those taxes, and that enabled the eventual establishment of the Adirondack Park. Since the Adirondacks contained the headwaters of several important state waterways, including the Hudson River, the state government began the process of setting aside land for public use and protection and preventing it from logging. And that was what apparently impacted the Sluters' decision to sell the land. This is interesting too. The New Deal programs implemented during the Great Depression, specifically the Civilian Conservation Corps, repaired and improved the infrastructure in state and national parks across the country, including the Adirondacks. Work included improvement and development of campsites and trails, stream improvement, and reforestation. So interesting how the actual history and the storyline combines. Let's see, I want to leave a little time for so much more. There's just so many sub-issues and themes, but I think that talking about mishaps at summer camp at this point in time is not complete without reference to Camp Mystic. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to spend a moment or two on Camp Mystic. Camp Mystic is a very sad camp where there was several, it's a camp of like 700 kids, but 7 of the cabins were in a floodplain. And last July 4th, There was a flood, 26 people drowned, most of those were campers, but there were a couple of counselors as well. The camp had no evacuation plan, hadn't trained counselors on what to do in the event of a flood, and their decision to evacuate the cabins that were in the flood zones came too late. That camp wanted to reopen this summer. Texas, in response to this incident, it has introduced many new, and I would say appropriate, restrictions on camps, requiring that planning and training be addressed. Though these are incidents that might occur once in 100 years, they do occur once in 100 years. And you have to, if you're inviting people and parents are trusting their children to you, you have to have a plan in case this is the once in 100 years. So at the moment, there was just a reference in the last day or two on TV that, of course, all the camps are applying for licenses. You have to have a license. And of 300 camps in the state of Texas, only 9 have so far been able to pass these new restrictions. And of course, we're coming on mid-May. Camp season starts usually early July, early July. There are also pending lawsuits, both civil and possibly criminal, relating to the deaths of those 26 people. The criminal would be manslaughter for recklessly causing the death, recognizing a risk and failure to take precautions against that risk. Just one final thing, then we'll do questions. Author Liz Moore, winner, no surprise, of several literary prizes. The format of the book I thought was interesting, a little intentionally disjointed, but I found it as confusing. There were so many characters, and then you're bouncing back and forth, and it's not always clear whether you're in the early 60s or the mid 70s. When I review a book, I always read it a second time. My second time through, I identified all of the ones from the chapters dealing with bear and teased those out and read all the ones except those together, and then went back and read all the ones about bear and found it much easier to follow. Apparently that wasn't the author's plan, but it sure worked for me. She lives in Philadelphia with her family, and she's director of the Masters of Fine Art program in creative writing at Temple. Her lucky students, if any of you have kids or grandkids who go to Temple, encourage them to take a class of hers. So that's only part of what I have to say, but time ticks away. So I'm happy to answer questions or try to answer questions if there are questions.
I've got the mic. Does anyone have any questions? Let me come over this way first.
You mentioned statutory.
Yeah, just talk right into the.
You mentioned statutory rape, and it's usually the girl that's being raped. And I heard of a case many years ago now, where a couple of young men, they had sex with a girl in their own home. Mother was working, and when the mother came home, she accused them both of statutory rape, and they were convicted. But what that meant was that they would be forever on this list of sexual aggressors and not allowed to ever work in a camp or a place where they would be, and they were like 16 themselves, 17 themselves, be allowed to live. And they'd be on this list. If they moved into your neighborhood, that people could look up that they had been convicted of a sexual crime. Is that still the case?
There is a sexual registry, a sex registry, that folks have to, who are found guilty of certain sex crimes, have to register for. That's public information. There are 3 levels, and depending on how serious the crime was, determines which level they are. And what's publicized is not only their name on the list, but what level they are. There is, but I'm not going to get the details. There is a relatively new circumstance where if you were convicted of a sex crime and on the registration, you can go back and have your circumstances revisited to see if in fact you should be on the list, or you've reached a point where you can be removed from the list. But I don't have all the details about that. Is there anyone familiar with, it's a great provision, it's a great opportunity for many people who, like examples that, like you are saying, who were young and immature at the time and ended up on the list. Maybe their time on the list should come to an end.
But at this point, they're on the list, and you have to go pay a lawyer to help you get off of the list so you can get certain jobs.
Right, absolutely. Certain jobs are prohibited. You're not permitted to live within a certain distance of schools. Halloween is a big night for people on that list. Many at times the parole, they're instructed they can't have trick-or-treating at their house. They have to make it clear that turn the lights off, put up a sign, make it clear that young people are not to stop there. And there's some oversight that will go around and make sure that these people are abiding by those rules. Yeah, there are restrictions, and neighborhoods don't want these people, and it's public knowledge. So often there are protests in neighborhoods, making it very uncomfortable for the person on the list to live there. Yeah, there are very significant consequences. They have been challenged constitutionally, that a defendant who has committed a sex crime has paid a price in some way. It may be jail, it may have been probation. So is this an unconstitutional, cruel and unusual type of punishment for somebody who has already paid their price, so to speak? But these registries have been found to withstand those kinds of challenges. But I do think that there is this new provision that allows a second look, that whoever this youngster was may be appropriate to visit with a lawyer and see if he or she might qualify.
So one of the things they used to do on Halloween, because I used to work the Halloween
Great.
we would, a certain level, the highest level sex offenders would all have to come into the probation department. And they entertain them for the, not entertain, but show them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, something educational, but to keep them, away. Yeah, and then the lower level ones, we used to go out and check the houses and make sure they didn't have the lights on and they weren't giving out candy.
Great, that's the oversight, yeah, that from a probation officer. Thank you.
No, if no one else has anything, I wanted to comment. You talked about the structure of the book, and that was my biggest complaint, was I just found myself sometimes getting confused. And you're like, okay, the author probably wrote the sections sort of the way you read them, but then did they or the editor intersperse them? Because we often have this discussion in our book sandwich and committee meetings about how nothing can just be written linearly anymore.
Right.
Everything
It's so
has to go
true.
back and forth, and we're like, just write it linear. It would be like, what was the point? So I have a feeling a lot of people who read the book might agree or will agree with you on that point. But it is an interesting choice that seems to be, I mean, the last 10 years or something, it seems like it's the way to falsely create some sort of suspense.
It's so true. So many books are written that way now. And this one, you'd reach a crescendo and then the chapter ends. And now it's like 4 or 5 chapters down the road before you pick it up, and your crescendo has left, and it's like, now what happened? Where am I? What was this? So it seems like she sort of forfeited height of interest in that particular storyline by dropping it and not picking it up till many chapters down the road.
I would agree with that. Does anyone have any oh, we're already after 1 o'clock. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Karen. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I know
Thanks.
if anyone is interested in the book, all of our copies are checked out right now, but you can ask at the info desk for a hold to be placed. We have Shark Heart, A Love Story is our final selection for the season. It's a very bizarre book. But I don't think anyone has ever read anything like it before in the past 10 years. So we have 1 copy of that. If that one's gone, then you can also ask for that at the info desk. Thank you. Thanks, Karen. That was great.
Thank you.